Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 238, the legal edition. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm Alan Haley, and today is Friday, July 15, 2016.
Okay, Alan, it's been quite a while since we've had you on the program. People don't know this, but every Wednesday, Al and I are on our keyboards pressing F5, refresh, from the Diocese of the Supreme Court of South Carolina's website, hoping that they will announce a decision. And this decision that we've been waiting for is taking quite a while, Alan.
It's been 10 months, and it's obviously something that Chief Justice Toll is still working on, because occasionally she'll sign on some old opinion, but they've pretty much disposed of every case that was argued while she was the Chief Justice, except this one.
Yeah, this is the last remaining case. A lot of people are like, well, is there going to be a big minority or what's going on? But we really don't know until the opinion comes, and every Wednesday, Al and I are on the case. So we've kind of been keeping Alan in the wings, for that. And we do have a big decision. Yeah.
The worst I could expect would happen when the decision comes out is that she would reverse the judgment below and send it back for another trial. Mm-hmm. I just don't see her making a decision or getting the court to decide that reversing the case completely and declaring the Episcopal Church now the winner of all the property. So at most, I think it'll go back for another trial. If that would be the greatest part of the downside, I think.
Okay, we're going to be bringing people some sad news or bad news, both. San Joaquin has lost in the Supreme Court of California.
Correct. They refused to review the decision of the Court of Appeals, which was very, very wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, the decision was very, very wrong, and they should have reviewed it, but they decided not to.
And here comes Paul's warning.
Yes.
2,000 years ago, he said, listen, if you have, trouble, the last place you want to take it is to second the courts. And right. Boy, is he right. How long have you been fighting this case for San Joaquin?
The lawsuit was started by the Episcopal Church and it's the Rump Diocese of San Joaquin in April of 2008. So we've gone, 8 years plus.
Yeah. Lots of money thrown at from both sides with the lawsuit. And you've never had your day in court.
Not really. Never did get a chance to argue the case, because the trial court, finally when we got to trial, he decided that his hands were tied by the previous decision of the Court of Appeals, and he was just going to rule for the Episcopal Church because he felt that's what he was required to do. It goes up to the Court of Appeals. They find that yes, he did everything wrong. He agreed with us on all the points, and then they came and said, well, though Bishop Schofield didn't properly amend the articles of his corporation sole, so therefore the deeds to his corporation sole were not valid, so therefore the property remains with the Episcopal Church. End of case, over. And that was what, we tried to convince him that you can't make that kind of a ruling on a corporation sole. If the name's wrong, what you do is you file a new deed with the changed name. You don't say that the deed is void and null. But they didn't want to hear that, and the California Supreme Court didn't want to get involved in it either.
Okay. Up to this point, every time we had good news or bad news, there was always one more procedure to do, one more brief to file. There's little hope now.
Right. There's still theoretically the possibility of filing a brief or petition for review with the West Supreme Court, but the odds of that are very, very small, because practically every other church case that has tried that, from Georgia, from Connecticut, all the other adverse cases to the people that pulled out of the Episcopal Church, and one appeal by the Episcopal Church in Fort Worth case, the Supreme Court has turned them all down, refused to hear any of those. And so the last church property case it heard was Jones v. Wolf back in 1979.
Wow.
And it's funny, well, the thing is, there's just no Protestants up on the Supreme Court right now. With the death of Justice Scalia, the number of Catholics is down from 6 to 5, and the number of Jews remains at 3, so there's no Protestants on the court. They're not interested in Protestant disputes.
No. Nor are we anymore. Um,
Yeah,
let's also talk. What's waiting is obviously South Carolina, and waiting for one in Texas as well.
that's right. They've argued that case, and it's been submitted to the Court of Appeals, so we're just waiting for a decision, I believe.
All right. So if a diocese, I would just want to talk quickly about what we've learned. We got about a good 5 minutes we can put into what we've learned in the 8 years of fighting tech.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
and I'm looking at South Carolina in this. What we've learned is if you're going to ever end up in court, it's good to be the person who sues for identity. Correct?
Correct, and to keep your identity, because the first thing the Episcopal Church will do, if you allow it to, is to organize a rump group, call it the same name, and claim to be the real you. It's as though, the minority, if Ford Motor Company held a shareholders meeting and there was a minority that disagreed with something, if they went down the street and held a new meeting and said, we're Ford Motor Company now, and they filed papers with the Secretary of State claiming to be Ford Motor and have designated a new president. That's what happened in the San Joaquin case, and the courts simply blinked it. I mean, let it happen, and didn't do anything about it. So, and that was ultimately what allowed them to say that therefore the property remains with the Episcopal Church because it never got changed. Well, you can't do it much worse than that, but that's the pattern that they follow. That's the strategy they evolved early on with San Joaquin, that we will pretend to be the real diocese, and so we can come into court and claim to have all and own its property and own its corporation soul. And in California, that strategy worked after 8 years, but it worked.
Now, also in religious law, throwing a Hail Mary lands more often than not.
Maybe it's hard to say because it's ironic. As you said, Paul said, "Don't take cases into civil courts." That's what the Episcopal Church canons say, also. By the way, Canon 4.19 says that you do not, no member of the church, no clergy, shall go into any secular court on any dispute arising under the Constitution and canons. Well, this was these property disputes all arise under the Constitution and canons because the Episcopal Church tries to claim its Dennis canon applies.
Mm.
And so it's every time it goes into court and starts one of these lawsuits against a withdrawing diocese, it's breaking its own canons. And I saw one commentator on the San Joaquin decision say, well, the lesson of this case is that if you're going to try to leave the Episcopal Church, you have to follow the rules very carefully. Well, not at all.
That's not true.
Episcopal Church breaks them every time, and the courts just say, so what? They're the Episcopal Church. And the other thing that's troubling, Kevin, is that the people in the Episcopal Church don't seem to care whether their canons are violated or not. With the adoption of the same-sex marriage rights for quote-unquote trial use, the Episcopal Church is breaking the rubrics of the prayer book, and everybody's saying, well, so what? So there's this lawlessness that's entered into the church that's sort of, I think, in parallel to the lawlessness we see in the federal government and certain state governments today, where they're just saying, she broke the law, she shouldn't have handled the emails like that, but so what? What difference does it make?
I have to admit, in the last 8-12 years, the rule of law has taken a big hit.
Yes.
For whatever reason,
and in the past, whenever that's happened, you can see empire after empire where the rule of law broke down after the empire got too big, expanded too far, and its budget could no longer finance its operations out of the tributes it received from the countries it occupied or whatever. We don't operate on tributes, but what we do is we borrow the money from the Chinese. We borrow the money from everywhere in the world, and we finance our empire that way. But it's pretty well broke, and the rule of law is breaking down just as it always has in older empires that are no longer with us. So
okay, well,
America.
You heard it from Alan. Buy gold, stockpile. I mean, yeah. As far as America goes, it may not be over yet, but it's been a nice ride for some of us for a while. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about. In the end of the day, our hope is in Christ.
Right.
If you read the Beatitudes, blessed are the persecuted, blessed are the poor. That even in these hard times,
If you stick
eh,
to Christ and His church, He said the gates of hell will not prevail against it,
mhm.
and that's what you have to hold on to. The Episcopal Church is no longer, in my view, a Christian church, so His saying does no longer applies to it.
No, that's true. Finally, you've probably been contacted by every priest in San Joaquin, but what's the transition going to be like?
Well, it will be hopefully as painless as possible. There's good relations between the Chancellor Rusty Van Roseboom and the attorneys for the Episcopal Church, and they have worked out a couple of other transitions very peacefully with other individual parishes that wanted to throw in the towel a while ago. So I expect it to go forward smoothly and operationally, but basically in the end, the property is going to have to be handed over to a group that has not got the congregations to fill them. A lot of the parishes and churches are going to just be empty and maybe eventually be put on the market for whatever they can bring. I don't know. So it's going to be, but Bishop Manise has been having a lot of contingency plans made for over a year now, ever since we lost in the Court of Appeals. He's been working on it, and I'm working with his clergy to develop alternate places to go. And he, of course, is one of the most seriously affected because his own cathedral in Fresno is going to have to be vacated, and it has a Spanish congregation that meets there every Sunday, about 800, 900 people. They're now going to have to find a new place to meet. So it's troublesome, but their faith is stronger than ever, and I have full confidence that they'll be able to overcome these temporary difficulties
Mhm.
and be
All right.
stronger for it. I hope.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, you and I have watched this in good times and bads over the last
Right.
10 years. I've never seen a person who's lost a congregation who's not been better off
In the end, right?
in the end. They're like, oh yeah, yeah, we lost in court, whatever. You know.
And that again bears out what Christ said. Yes,
Mhm.
you
So,
put your faith and trust in Him.
um, Alan, next time I see you, I'm hoping we're talking about the South Carolina results,
Okay.
which I
Or
hope we
Fort
can be
Worth.
smiling and Fort
Right.
Worth and happy. And oh, by the way, we won. We'll have to see. I'm
Okay.
Kevin Carlson.
Very good, Kevin. I'm Alan Haley.